Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Carla Harris to Authors at Wharton.
Thank you.
Carla, you almost seem happy to be here.
I am very happy to be here.
Why? Tell us why, because I think when you're in the middle of an institution like Wharton, you don't always appreciate how great it is.
It's inspiring just to be in the space. I could feel as soon as I walked on campus earlier today, all of the energy, all the buzz, all the intellect that's sort of floating around everywhere. It reminds me of my glory days in business school 35 years ago.
Love it. So take us back to that stage. What was it like when you were a business school student? What were your goals, fears, dreams, hopes?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, my goal was to go back to the street. By then, I had figured out that I really wanted to be an investment banker, had to figure out where.
I'm sorry, did you say wanted to be an investment banker?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. The summer after my sophomore year in college, I was exposed for my very first time to Wall Street through the SEO program, which still exists today, Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. And I didn't know anything about Wall Street, but I am negatively motivated. You should know that about me. So when you tell me I can't do something, I'm all over it like a bad smell. And, everybody said, oh, Wall Street is so difficult. And I have to tell you, Adam, I was exhilarated by it. One, because I had never done it before. Two, because I realized that it wasn't that difficult. You needed some analytical skills and some quantitative skills. But the thing that pushed me over the edge is that I did not see a lot of people who looked like me. I did not see a lot of women. And I did not see a lot of people of color, and I couldn't figure out why. And that made it even more interesting to pursue. And that was the summer that I realized that the reason I wanted to be a lawyer was because, I thought I could call the shots. I thought I could have a certain lifestyle. I could have a lot of responsibility very early on. And that was the summer that I realized that the lawyers didn't call the shots. The business people did, but the lawyers helped you get it done within the context of the law. That could have a lot of responsibility very early on, because there I was at 19 and had never been to the street. And I was now doing analysis from which people were making decisions to issue, hundreds of millions of dollars of bonds based on my work. And oh, by the way, they give you remuneration that could give you a certain lifestyle. So that really sort of piqued my interest. And I went back to undergrad saying, that's what I want to do. Didn't do it right out of undergrad. Went back to Harvard Business School and said, this is what I want to do. And by then I had narrowed down the firms. Morgan Stanley was the place I wanted to do it because of all the firms I met during the summer, my SEO summer. It was the place where I felt like I could really be me. And that was important because all of us can put on a face for a period of time. Every one of us, we've been socialized to do so. But where you can really be you is where you're going to have an opportunity for long-term success. And I figured that I could be Carla there, and I've made my way.
How did you figure that out? Did you just wear those shoes and see how people reacted?
No, I'll tell you, the SEO program is just wonderful because it gives you an opportunity to go to each of the banks that are participating in the program. So even though I was assigned to what was then Blythe, Eastham, and Payne Webber, I got a chance to visit Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and what was then Lehman Brothers and Solomon Brothers. And when I went to the Morgan Stanley cocktail party, it was a real aha moment because everybody I talked to was a little bit different than the last person I talked to. So even in my naive 19-year-old mind, I said, there's a lot of different equations that equal success. Surely there'll be one for me. And that stuck with me till I graduated 5 years later from Harvard Business School. And that's why I made that choice.
Wow. So what did you learn as you started your career? You're in a situation where, like you said, you don't have a lot of direct role models. Mm-hmm. What knowledge and skills did you have to pick up that were tacit, that nobody taught you?
Those are all the pearls, as I like to call them, my hard-earned and hard-learned pearls. Those were all the pearls that I learned in that first year because I really did buy this whole concept of a meritocracy. Every single company that came to Harvard Business School sold a meritocracy. You can go straight to the top. All you have to do is be smart and work really hard. And I thought, I got that. I'm pretty smart. You can't outwork Carla Harris. Even today, you cannot outwork Carla Harris. But that combination did not equal maximizing my success. And I figured that out in the first year. So the hard part was figuring out, well, what were the other components of the success equation. And that's what I wrote about in the first book, Expect to Win, your authenticity, the fact that you can't do it alone. You need a mentor and you need a sponsor. You also need to have a penchant for taking risks. You need to be able to accelerate and articulate your voice. You can't sit there and just assume people know that you're smart. Those were lessons that nobody told me about, but they make all the difference in maximizing your success.
Mm-hmm. So I'd love to talk a little bit about mentorship and sponsorship and how to get it.
Yeah.
I imagine you looked up the hierarchy. You saw a lot of people who looked like me, maybe older but no balder. and how did you attract mentors? How did you bring sponsors on board?
Yeah.
What did you learn there?
Well, first of all, nobody was using the word sponsor back in 1987. And I used the word for the first time in public at the University of Michigan at the Black Business Students Association, because by then I had figured it out and I was a third-year associate. And I realized that somebody has to be in the room carrying your paper, because all of the important decisions about your career are made in a room where you're not present. Your compensation is decided in a room where you're not present. Your promotions are decided in a room where you are not present, and new assignments are given out in a room where you are not present. So somebody has to carry your paper and use their currency on your behalf, and that's what I coined a sponsor back in 1990. Now let's talk about how you get one. Here's what I tell people as they're entering into their jobs. Study your organization for 2 weeks, and you want to note the people who have a seat at the decision-making table, and if you can't figure that out, ask someone. It's just that easy. Number two, you want to make sure that the person that you think about who has a seat at the table has some visibility into your work. Because if everybody knows that I don't work with Adam and he goes into the room pounding the table on my behalf, he'll have no credibility. So that person needs to have some visibility into your work. You also need to make sure that you note the toxic people in your environment, because you need to learn how to manage them as well. Now, once you've figured out who has a seat at the table, who has visibility in your work, pick 2 or 3 of those people from that list and start to build a relationship with them. And building a relationship is just frequency of touch. And it's much easier in your professional life than even in your personal life, because with very light touches in a professional environment, people start to build relationships and they think they know you.
What's an example? If you wanted to recruit someone in this room as a sponsor, where would you start?
First of all, I'd figure out, okay, who do I spend time with? Who has visibility into my work? Now I'll think about ways that I can interact with them. So what's your name, ma'am? Uwa. So I said, oh, Uwa comes in at 7:30. Well, I make sure that I'm in at 7:15. So when she comes in, she has no choice but to say good morning. It's like, good morning, Uwa, how are you? So now we're going to lunch, and I see if she's going to lunch, and I say, hey, you're going down to the cafeteria? Let me walk with you. And maybe I strike up a conversation in the elevator. I'm going down to get a Starbucks at 2:30. I say, hey, I got to have one right here. Can I get you one? How you like it? Right? And then on Fridays, I say, hey, what you got going on for the weekend? And the next week I do it again. Right? So it's just those light touches, and you'll be surprised how quickly an impression is formed. So when you're not in the room and somebody says Carla Harris, who I say, yeah, good gal. I talk to her all the time, right? That's how it happens.
You make it sound so easy.
It's much easier than you think. I used to think it was difficult as well, but I started realizing, even as a sponsor of people in the room, that when someone's name would come up, if nobody else would say anything, and I knew that person even just a little, I would say, oh, yeah, good guy. He's really smart, carries himself well. And if there's no other data in the room, my data carries.
So I think it's helpful to start with the process of, who do I interact with regularly? Oftentimes, though, when you're junior at the bottom of an organization, you don't have access to the people in power. And so what are you doing? Are you working your way up through levels of management, or are you finding a backdoor? So
here's the deal. In most organizations, you hear senior people say, oh, I have an open door policy. Take them up on it, right? No, you'd be surprised, because senior people want access to junior people. But here's another secret. They are just as afraid of you as you are of them. They don't know how to interact with the junior folks. They don't know what to say. They feel slightly uncomfortable as well. So make it easy for them by saying something. I always wanted to make sure that I was ready when a senior person said to me, I used to work for Vikram Pandan. He was at Morgan Stanley. And he would come up to you all the time and say, what's going on? What are you doing? And the first couple times I was like, right? But every time after that, I knew he was going to come and say, what are you doing? I was always prepared with an answer. And I used to play the game with myself. Suppose I get stuck in the elevator with John Mack. What am I going to say? And then when it wasn't John Mack and it was James Gorman, I'd say, okay, what is James going to say? I'm always ready. So it doesn't take that much to be ready. Here's the other thing. Don't forget the great gatekeepers in any organization, the executive assistants. Oh, yes. right? Do not be arrogant. Understand their power. And make sure that you build relationships with them. I can't tell you, Adam, how many times I've wanted access to a senior person, and I would say to the assistant, oh, I really need to see him. And because I had been respectful and we had built a relationship, she said, well, I got the calendar. He's going to the bathroom at 10:23. Be in the hall, right? But you'd be surprised. You have more access than you think. And don't overlook those town halls where you have an opportunity to ask a question. They're dying to get questions. You're sitting in the third or fourth row, raise your hand. I am so-and-so. I work in so-and-so department. My question is X. He's going to remember. She's going to remember, right? So it's much easier than you think to have access.
One of the things that I think about when you give that example of Vikram Pandit sort of putting you under the gun a little bit is a lot of people feel pressure to have the answers. And giving an answer makes you look smart. But one of our alums, Allison Wood Brooks, published some fascinating research showing that if you ask a thoughtful question, you come across as both smart and likable. And so you don't have to have the expertise, right? You just have to ask something that makes the senior person feel like, oh, well, that person just made me have a brilliant thought. I really like that person now, and they were smart in setting it up. What kinds of questions do you recommend asking?
Yes, it depends on the context, right? And one of the things that I say to people, when you're going into a conference room and it's going to be a group meeting, think like an owner. And John Mack helped me to hone that skill. If I were running the meeting, what would I be thinking about? If the client is looking for X, what else might they be looking for? Let me make sure that I ask that particular question. Do I understand what was just said? Maybe I say, Adam, give me more. I didn't follow. Can you repeat that again? So those kinds of things show that you're listening and that you're engaged. And those things also ascribe value to your person in that room. So she's absolutely right. I don't know so much about the likability, but certainly the perception that you are engaged and you care about what's happening. That's what a question in the room will do for you.
So on the flip side of this, you spend a lot of time trying to get people to be sponsors and mentors. And I feel like I see a lot of senior executives who are on board with mentoring. They know they have to develop their junior people, build a pipeline of leaders. Sponsorship seems to be much rarer, and I'm always puzzled by this, because what I constantly find myself saying to CEOs is, this is actually a lot less work. You don't actually have to do anything. It doesn't require your time or your energy. All you have to do is be an advocate for this person when they're not in the room. Surely you have some ways of closing that gap. Tell us how.
Absolutely. Well, here's the real reason that you see so much reticence is that they are afraid. What happens if they don't get it done? How will the sponsoree look at them? That is what I've found as I've talked to leader after leader after leader as to why they don't sponsor people. So what I say to them is the sponsoree is not holding you personally accountable for getting it done, because they know that a lot happens in that room. Some things will happen in that room that you cannot control, but what they care about is that you're going into that room with your best effort to try to get it done for them, and that you will leave that room if it is not done, and you will give them full visibility. Now, obviously, you can't tell them everything that happened in the room, but you can say, didn't happen this year, very competitive. There were 3 comments that were made that I think at the end of the day really kind of hurt the case. And here's what we are going to do over the next 12 months to make sure that that does not happen next year. So they want the investment, they want the commitment. Will they be disappointed? Absolutely. But you can also articulate that narrative by saying, here were the things that people liked. This is why it was close. The candidates that made it over the line, they had these things. But I think we got a shot next year. So let's go back in the ring, especially if it's somebody that you want to retain.
So compelling. The other fear I hear regularly is, what if sponsoring you makes me look bad? I tell everyone Carla Harris is a genius, and then they've come to believe that you're a moron, and it ruins my reputation.
Yeah.
How do you debunk that one?
But here's the deal. When you're taking on sponsoring someone, you need to feel comfortable that you know that person. So you just can't assign me to someone and say, use your currency. I have to have a reason. That's why I said the person needs to have some visibility into your work. So if you've made the decision to sponsor somebody, they're not going to make you look like a moron. And here's the other issue. Everybody makes a mistake. So if you have sponsored someone, if you have used your currency on someone, and a year later they turned out to be that moron, where things happen. But that can't scare you off of using your currency to help another leader. If you want to have an organization that's going to have a legacy of leadership, when you leave the leadership seat, you must invest. And you must invest now, because it's the future of the organization. You're a stockholder today. Hopefully you'll be a stockholder tomorrow. And you want to make sure that those who are running the company tomorrow get it right.
It's funny because when I hear that, one of the ways I want to push back is to say, well, that actually is a sign to me you're not sponsoring enough people. Because if you were championing 20 or 30 junior people, one is not going to put egg on your face, right? But if you think that one is going to ruin your reputation, then you're not doing a lot of sponsorship in the first place.
Yeah, well, it's hard to sponsor 20 or 30 people, right? Because if you're putting all your currency behind candidates, usually in any given year, you can sponsor 2 or 3, is the way I look at it. Now, you can mentor more than that. And just to level set, the mentor is the person you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly to. This is the person that you can share the intimate details of your career with, your fears, your concerns, your mistakes, your triumphs. The sponsor, as I said, is the person that's carrying your paper. You want them focused on the good, and the good. Not that they don't know the other things, but you want them focused on the good, and the good. So it's very different. I mentor more people than I sponsor in any given year because I have a finite amount of currency. Now, after 35 years, I have a lot more currency, and I will spend it, because here's the other thing that I've learned. The way to grow your power is to give it away. So the more I spend it, and the more I can position myself as a kingmaker or a queenmaker, the more powerful I will become.
That almost sounds like something that a few leaders on this planet need to hear.
I've been saying it as loudly as I can, and I say it like this. If you don't buy my intellectual arguments for sponsoring, then take the selfish one. And the selfish one is think of yourself as the kingmaker or the queenmaker.
Love it. That's a great segue to Lead to Win. So you have a lot of advice in this book about how to be more influential regardless of what context you're in. Give us your greatest hits.
Well,
and also leave us wanting more, because we want people to read the book.
Okay, I won't give you all of them, but I will tell you, chapter 2 talks about how you are consumed, how you want to lead. Please know that if you're standing in front of someone wearing the leadership jersey, they are consuming you. And you have the power to control that moment. So be careful and be gentle with it. You want people to walk away motivated and inspired. Even if you are giving them criticism, you want them to walk away and want to try a little bit harder. But the heart of the book, chapter 6, which is what I call intentional leadership, the pearls of intentional leadership, because it doesn't just happen. You have to be intentional, and you must be intentional around authenticity. You must be intentional around building trust. We're in an uncertain environment, and people need to trust you in order to follow you into that uncertain environment. You need to be focused and intentional around creating clarity even when you can't see. You must be intentional about creating other leaders, because if all roads lead back to you, you're going to cap your success and the organization's success. You must be intentional about diversity. It will not just happen. It will not just happen. We are all vulnerable to unconscious bias. I don't care who you are and where you were educated. You must also be intentional around innovation. It is the dominant competitive parameter. You must teach your teams how to innovate, which means you must teach your teams how to fail. You must also be intentional about inclusivity, soliciting other people's voices. And then finally, you must be willing to call a thing, no matter how bad the thing might be. And those are the pearls of intentional leadership. And I left you a lot of other stuff in the other chapters.
Good. There are a few that I want to unpack a little bit. So let's start with the idea that you mentioned of giving your power away. What does that look like?
Yes, that means not always controlling exactly the way things ought to happen, or in fact what should happen. You should also make sure that you are empowering people on your team to say, you handle this, or I won't give the presentation. This is a room full of senior people. They need to see how smart you are. So why don't you give the presentation? Or why don't you come up with the solution? Or why don't you call the client and set up the meeting? So it's putting your people in the right light so that people can see how smart they are, or how focused they are, or how great they are in terms of execution, or what a great relationship person they are. So the way I've tried to think about it over the years is if I see someone that's working with me that has a deficit in some area, I try try really hard to keep putting them out there. And I will talk to them and say, you did that well, but you could have done that a little bit better. And really giving them that constant feedback. And leadership today is a different level of investment than it was when I started. And if you want to retain your best people, it's going to be one-on-one combat. No longer can you go in the corner office in the ivory tower and not engage. The two most important words in today's business ecosystem, community and engagement.
One of the things that I hear as an undercurrent of that is the selfish argument for giving your power away is it saves you time. It sounds like you're not presenting and necessarily leading every meeting that you would have if you were insisting on holding the reins.
But it doesn't necessarily save you time, because now I have to be thoughtful about, okay, what does he need? What do I need to tell him? What kind of attaboy do I need to give him? What kind of criticism do I need to give? So it doesn't necessarily save you time, but you're using your time differently. Mm-hmm.
Like it. Okay, good. I stand corrected. Authenticity. Mm-hmm. I thought the way that you wrote about it in the book was really powerful. I see a lot of people misunderstand authenticity as being unfiltered.
Yeah.
They take it as an excuse to just say whatever is on their mind. That's not what you're talking about.
Not at all. And in fact, I see more younger professionals making that mistake. So
you don't say.
Yeah. Well, they believe in order to be authentic, they have to have all of them on display. So here's what it means to bring all of you into a room. Number one, know who you are. And I don't say that lightly, because before the pandemic, I would argue that we were all running around so often that we didn't say, who am I today relative to who I was in 2012 or 2019? So number one, know who you are. And if you haven't done that recently, you must do it, because there's not a person on the planet that wasn't impacted in some way by the COVID-19 crisis or by witnessing the social unrest on the streets of the United States and frankly around the world on the back of racial inequities. So who are you today? Number two, understand that we're all multifaceted. There's not just one you. There is an intellectual you, there's an argumentative you, there's a frivolous you. We're all multifaceted. Embrace that and embrace all the facets. Now, the third key to bringing all of you into the room, now you relax. Now you can relax and meet people where they are. You are free to feel the energy in the room and decide which facet of you will connect authentically with the person on the other side of the conversation, with the 300 people in the auditorium, with the 15 people at the boardroom. You can feel it. But if you are standing there trying to, and you're preoccupied and you're trying to think, what do I need to do? What do I need to show? How do I need to show up so they will see that I'm impressive and that I'm smart, or worse, that I'm in charge? Because then you got to tell somebody you're in charge. You're not in charge, right? So you're preoccupied with that, and you are not free to meet people where they are. So that's what being authentic is all about, and that's how you do it.
It sounds like when you help people think about their identity and who they are, you're not interested in necessarily releasing all their thoughts or all their emotions. You want them to be clear about their values.
That's exactly right. And clear about being in the room and being present in that moment and knowing what you're offering, right? Every time I walk into a meeting, I think to myself, you know, what are we playing for today? Am I playing to get the business today? Am I playing to further the conversation? Am I playing for another at-bat? What am I playing for? So I have a goal, but that's it. Other than that, I walk in and say, okay, let's see what's going to happen. Maybe they want me to go through the book. Maybe they want to have a conversation. But I'm free in that moment to figure out what needs to happen, as opposed to pushing on what, you know, here's what I think we ought to do in these 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned unconscious bias. I think that one of the things we've seen that I think is incredibly unfortunate empirically is that it is much easier for me as a white man to call out bias because I'm not perceived as having skin in the game. Whereas if you do it, people will wonder, are you being nepotistic? Is it self-serving? Are you trying to advantage your group? Which is absurd, right? And I wish that evidence didn't exist. It does, and I know you've lived it. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you've navigated that tightrope? How have you called out bias without getting backlash?
Well, because sometimes I just ask the question in the room. So let me give you an example. You're sitting around a conference table and you're talking about summer candidates. And somebody says, oh, I don't think Maria ought to get an offer today because, you know, I'm not sure she has the analytical and quantitative chops for the job. Now you say, oh, really? Tell me more. What did we test? Did we give her a model to do? Did we assign her comparable company analysis? What did we give her to do that makes you think that she doesn't have the analytical or quantitative chops? Silence in the room, because there was no data behind that. I think she doesn't have the analytical or quantitative chops. But when the question is asked in the room, it turns out we didn't give her anything to do that summer that showed whether or not she had analytical or quantitative skills. Now you say, oh, we didn't give her anything? We didn't test it? Oh, well, then we got to give Maria an offer, right? We can't just not give her an offer and we fail to test. We got to give her a pass and think she's pretty smart, so she gets an offer, right? Nothing said in the room. Right? Next, you got an offer. Let's go. Right? But you got to be willing. You have to be willing to use your voice. That's why I say call a thing, right? Because there's so often, and there's so many organizations across all industries, those feelings come out in a room, and when nobody questions or can debate them, they live and they stand. And that's how decisions get made.
Carla, what I find so interesting about that approach is you didn't mention gender. You didn't say, hey, I think you're being sexist.
No.
Or are we, potentially doubting her because she's a woman?
No, I didn't have to. All I had to do was ask the question, tell me more, and let's talk about the facts, because that's what bias is all about. It's your feelings, not your facts. Now, there's obviously more to bias than that, but I've been testing and challenging leaders to say, when you're making a people decision, check yourself. It takes 15 seconds. Check yourself and say, oh, am I making that decision on fact or feeling? And I'm not saying your feelings aren't legitimate, but if you're making it on feelings, then you got to go the second order and third order derivative down and test that. That is the fair thing to do.
What do you do in situations where people do come back with what they think are facts, but are actually biased?
Then you push it again. You push it again. And sometimes you get in an argument with people about it, but at least you've gotten the argument in the room. And if you are a group of partners and a group of senior people having that conversation, you should be able to challenge each other around that, right? Or there's something else wrong in that culture.
All right, that is a good segue to our lightning round before we go to audience questions. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay, ground rules. Between a word and a sentence, ideally.
Okay.
You can pass once if you want. For the record, I do not expect you to pass, but you're welcome to. First question, if you couldn't work at Morgan Stanley, what company would you be most drawn to as a place where you could be you?
Oh, where a place that I could be me. That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked that question. Well, I'm going to say, based on what I know right now, I'm going to pick Walmart. Why? Because I'm on the board of Walmart. I've been there for 5 years, and I've seen some incredible things about that culture that make me feel I could just walk in there and be Carla and do well.
Doug and Donna will be very pleased to hear that. We'll be sure to send them a transcript. Secondly, what was the worst career advice you got early on?
Yeah, I got a lot of that.
We'll take them all.
The worst was I went to talk to somebody about a situation that was going on, and I really needed a script, right? I really needed somebody to tell me what to say, because I had never had that conversation before. And someone said, oh, just go talk to your boss. You should talk to your boss. That was it. And I was sitting there saying, well, what should I say? I know I have 2 Harvard degrees, but I've never had this conversation. I need words. I need a sentence. I need a paragraph. I need something. And to me, it was just the worst. And I have to tell you, that informed who I became as a mentor. Because I thought to myself, someone who has accomplished things all their lives, who are at this critical moment where they just don't know, it takes a lot of courage, because the one thing that smart people don't know how to do is ask for help. And it takes a lot of courage to reach out and say, I need some help on this one, especially in that kind of environment. And to get nothing, you're walking out feeling worse than when you walked in, because it took all that courage to expose yourself, and then you got nothing, right? So I remember thinking to myself, when I'm in the position to give advice, there's nobody that's going to leave my presence without prescriptive advice. Now, you may choose not to take it, but you're not going to walk away without a solution, even if it means a script. And anybody that I've mentored will tell you that if they come in and say, I'm going to have a conversation with so-and-so, I say, okay, here's how he is. He likes it in bullet points, not paragraphs. Here are the 4 sentences that you need to use. Boom, 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 right? And because it's horrible. So that was pretty bad.
You just anticipated my next question, which is, what's your favorite piece of advice to give to undergrads or MBA students?
Yeah, own your power. Own your power. So often when you're an undergrad or you're graduating MBA, you think I'm new, I'm coming in there and I don't know anything. You know something. That's why they hired you. And there may be a lot that you have to learn, but don't abdicate your energy, your work ethic, your innovation, your creativity. You're bringing something to the table. Just because you don't know a particular thing or because you have a really rough experience in that first deal, don't walk away and think, oh, right, it's over and start losing your confidence. Own your power.
Okay, to potentially contradict that, do you ever worry that our 20-somethings are owning their power too much?
No, I don't worry. And I try to also tell the 20-somethings, know the difference between arrogance and confidence. Because arrogance will take you down. It will take you down and hard. So beware.
How would you describe the difference?
Oh, confidence is knowing that there are things, not to directly quote your book, but knowing things that you do not know, right? But that you come ready to learn, right? And that you're confident that you can learn quickly. You're confident that you have a commitment to excellence and you're going to get it right. Arrogance is knowing or thinking that you know everything and that nobody can tell you anything and that you will master everything. You know, there's not even a fine line between those two in my view. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. How has your creative background shaped your career?
Yes, I will tell you that Carla the singer has the ability to feel the audience in a way that I would say an ordinary banker might not be able to do, right? So I can walk in and know, oh, should I give the book or do they want to talk? I'll always ask the question because I don't want to be presumptuous, but I can pivot in that moment because as a singer, I've done it a million times. And I'll never forget my first Carnegie Hall concert in 2005. We had rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed 14 songs and we were ready. But at song number 12, Adam, I could feel that we were on the mountain. That was my crescendo. And if I had sang one more note, I was going to be on the other side of that mountain. So I looked at that audience. They were all happy and standing up. And I said, good night, everybody. And the band was like, what? I'm like, let's go. Good night, everybody. I could just feel it, right? And so I've taken those feelings, you know, into the boardroom. And when somebody's challenging you or somebody's not believing you or they're looking at you like a banker who's trying to take advantage of them, I can feel that and I go right there. And what are you afraid of? You don't trust me on this? What are you worried about? And I go right there. And many times their face is just like yours. They're like, she called me on it. But that dissipates the issue right there.
I love that you just gave us a real world example of the George Costanza advice on Seinfeld, to quit on a high note and just walk out of the meeting. You actually did it in a performance.
I sure did. 2005, Carnegie Hall. Good night, everybody. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What is something that you wish Wall Street leaders would understand that they don't?
Yeah, that they should leverage their people more. Because most, in my opinion, this is across all industries. It's not just in financial services, but certainly I've seen it over and over in financial services that many women and people of color leave organizations because they're poorly leveraged. They have so much more to give, but nobody's ever asked them to give it. Nobody takes advantage of their intellect or their previous experience or their perspective, and it dies on the vine. So I would say to leaders, you know, make sure you take an inventory of all the talent that's in your organization. Before you start thinking about running out and hiring externally, check the folks that are in your house, right? Because I might have hired you for one specific job and I never go back and look at your resume and think about all the other four or five things that you did that you came to the table with that I didn't need because I hired you for this one job. But now there are other opportunities, and how might I be able to use you? I've been able to see firms do that. We tried at one point to sort of take that inventory to figure out how to move people around laterally, but I haven't found an organization that's mastered that yet.
Hopefully one of you will build that organization. We're waiting for it. To close out the lightning round, what does the Vice Chair of Wealth at Morgan Stanley have to say about an impending recession?
Well, I'll tell you, Full disclosure, I'm a glass half full kind of girl. And while I won't debate that we will have a recession of sorts, I don't think that it will be a hard one like I've seen in the past. I think that it'll be a softer one. Now, the thing that can blow my argument up is if we have another big surprise on the geopolitical front that we didn't anticipate, if these midterm elections cause more division and derision than what we've already seen, then it certainly could spill over into the economy in a bad way.
Fingers crossed. Okay, we got some amazing audience questions submitted, and some, it looks like, are still coming in. First one, let's start with, how did your friendships change as your career advanced?
I'm very proud of the fact that many of my friendships stayed intact. That was really important to me. I come from Jacksonville, Florida, for those of you who don't know, and many of my friends didn't leave Jacksonville or they didn't leave the state of Florida. And I remember going up to Harvard and I could see those looks. They thought I wasn't going to come back the same Carla, or that I was going to be removed from them. And it was really important to me, Adam, that did not happen. So I tried really hard to bring my friends along in the experiences that I was having, even though they were having different life experiences. So, my girlfriend from the time I was 9, she's still my best friend down at home. Now, I certainly added more people into my network that are really good friends and other best friends that I met along the way. So my network of friends have expanded, but it's still a very tight-knit group of people that, I sort of call my ride or die people. So I haven't lost that many friendships from grade school, believe it or not.
Wow.
Okay, but I was intentional about that.
That speaks to something that multiple people are curious about. What was it like to get the call from President Obama? And what did you learn from that experience?
Yes, well, I'll tell you that the call actually came from Karen Mills, who at that time was the head of the SBA. So she was also an Obama appointee. And she literally, and this speaks to the power of relationships. And I had a relationship with Karen because we both in financial services. She had been in the VC community. I'm obviously at Morgan Stanley. We would see each other at Women in Finance, Women Leadership conferences all the time. Remember, light touches, you build relationships. And she literally called me one afternoon in my office and said, "How would you like to work for this administration?" And I said, "Oh, wow. That could be exciting." She said, "How would you like my job?" I said, "Ooh, it's missing a zero." No, but I was like, I don't think I'm gonna do that, right? And I said, "But I would love to work with this administration." And she said, "Well, here's a role that actually fits everything that you've been about for the last, 25 years." And she said, "It's about women. It's about women business owners. It's about women business leaders. It's a National Women's Business Council." And I said, "Tell me more." And I became more and more excited over the course of that half-hour conversation and then raised my hand to do it. And it was my first time actually ever doing anything like that in public service. I learned 3 important lessons. The first one is your ability to get anything done in Washington is directly correlated with how many hands you shake. They talk about Wall Street being a relationship business. Nothing like Washington, D.C. and politics. Your ability to get anything done is directly correlated with how many hands you shake, the relationships you have. The second thing that I learned is that the place is a sieve. Every time I went into a meeting, they already knew what had happened in the meeting before and the meeting before. And I was like, whoa, that was really eye-opening there. And then the third thing is that the way you get things done is that you think about the second and third year of an administration, because the first year, all the deck chairs are shifting. New appointees, people are coming in and out of the seats. Not a whole lot gets done. The fourth year, people know that you're going to leave the seat, especially if the incumbent is going to lose. So they're like, "I'm not doing anything because you'll be gone in a few months." So the time to get it done is in year 2 and year 3.
Excellent. All right. Next question is, have you found ways to use your identity as a strength as a woman of color?
Absolutely. And this will be one for those of you who are thinking, "Oh man, I'm the only one that looks like me in the room. I'm the only woman in the room, or I'm the only person of color." I see an amen over here. I'm the only person of color in the room. Well, here's the deal. If you're the only one that looks like you in the room, You're the only one that looks like you in the room. It is an asset. So from this day forward, never think about it as a liability again. Because if you're the only one in the room, you don't have to vie for attention because everybody's looking at you. That's true. You have an audience, and all you have to do is to deliver your excellence right into that opportunity. And here's the thing that I really like. If I even remotely smell that you have low expectations of me because who I am, I like that even more. Because the lower your expectations, the more I'm gonna blow you away. It's one of those come to mama right here.
Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Who has been your best mentor and best sponsor, and how did you pick them?
Yes, my best mentor I've actually kept for 35 years. And I met her in 1984, right when I came out of Harvard undergrad, and I was green. I was green, and I don't even see anything in here green, greener than the lining in your coat. I was so green. And she taught me a lot. And even to this day, Adam, whenever I'm about to have an important conversation, I'll call her and I'll say, I'm going to say blah, blah, blah. And she'll go, no, maybe you should say this, and juxtaposition the sentences that way. And as good as I think I am now of creating and articulating my own narrative, she makes it better, right? And remember, the mentor has to be somebody that you trust, that knows you well and understands your context. And then the sponsor, some of the best sponsors, actually, my best sponsor, I just worked for the first time in these last 5 years. And, I won't say his name, but the Morgan Stanley folks know his name. But he was somebody who really got me. And he was somebody that was easy to speak truth to power. And whenever I wanted to say something to him that was pretty serious, I would say, can we have an adult conversation? And that was to get him ready, because he knew I was coming straight, no chaser, that I wasn't going to pretty it up. I wasn't going to put it in the political context. I was going right there, and I could do that. And he was always constructive on the conversation, even if it was something I didn't want to hear. So I would say that he, hands down, had been my best sponsor over the 30 years.
Bravo.
Yeah.
It's striking to me that on the mentor part, that even after 35 years, you haven't still fully internalized and been able to anticipate everything that your mentor is going to see.
Oh, that's right. That's exactly right. But she knows me well. And the person you're going to give the mentor label in your life needs to know you very well. And they need to feel comfortable that they can give it to you straight, no chaser. And they also need to have the confidence that you will execute. If all of those things are not in place, then I would humbly say that person is your advisor. And an advisor can be powerful. It's also a great seat to have in somebody's life. But that's not the person that you necessarily share all the intimate, dirty details and your own fears and insecurities with.
Speaking of fears and insecurities, can you tell us about a low point in your career and how you dealt with it and how it's shaped you today?
Woo, absolutely. So I was probably a third-year associate, and man, I was getting my head handed to me. And there were a couple of people that I was working with very early on that completely, decimated my confidence. I mean, my confidence was so low that if you had said your name is Carla Harris, I would have said, are you sure? I mean, I was in a bad place. And I was starting to question, whether or not I should stay, whether or not I had made the right choice. And I happened to call my best friend at home, and I called her mother. Well, actually, I called her to talk to her, but I got her mother. And I said, hey, Miss Breaker, is Cheryl home? And she said, no, baby, she's not home. Then she said, Carla, what's wrong? And I said, I just had a meltdown. And, I don't really cry that much, and I don't like to cry, but I just had a meltdown. And she said to me, baby, Psalm 91 and Psalm 4, click. And that's all she said. And so I started reading Psalm 91 and Psalm 4 just because Ms. Breaker said so. But I would tell you, after a couple weeks, I started to have clarity. And I started to think about what was really going on and why I was feeling the way that I was feeling and why this person, kept making me feel like I couldn't do the work. And what this person would do is every time I'd go to ask a question, they would say, what? You're asking me that? They didn't teach you that at Harvard Business School? What in the world? What is wrong with you? Right? And that was what was going on. And then they would say, go ask Sammy. Go ask Bill. Don't ask me, ask that person. Well, I was starting to get clarity, but then one day that person said, go ask Bill. And Bill was so upset, and he just unleashed. He said, they're telling you to ask me because they don't know. How stupid can they be? Bah, 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 bah. So all of a sudden, I got it, right? And at the same time, I also realized that I had the power to say no, because at the time there was an assignment associate that would give out the transactions, and I kept getting assigned to that person over and over again. Well, I thought it's because perhaps I was doing some kind of good job because I kept working with that person. But what I realized, I was getting that person because all my colleagues were saying no. So when and I didn't, how green, what did I say? Your shirt, your lining, I was green. I didn't know I could say no. So the next time the assignments associate called me in and said, you're going to work with so-and-so, I said, He said, what do you mean? Trying to give me that bravado. What do you mean? I said, no. It's a complete sentence. No. Right? And then he went, because now he had to realize he had to find somebody else to work with that person. And after I unhooked myself from working with that person, then everybody else I worked with, oh, she's great, she's really smart. I started getting a whole different experience. But that was really rough.
Wow. Well, I don't want to say I'm glad you went through that, but it was a great story. So
I'm glad I went through it.
It served a purpose.
Yeah, it did.
There are a couple of questions revolving around the challenges that are, I think, upon us right now. So one has to do with how do you keep people motivated when they may be burned out, they may be languishing, the pandemic is dragging on, it's sort of becoming endemic, but nobody really knows.
This is what I meant when I said leadership is going to have to be far more engaging. You're going to have to go person by person with your people to kind of understand where they are and what it's going to take to keep them inspired. And for some people, it may be a rest. Some of your people, you may say, go home for 4 days, don't call me. You need some rest. It's okay, we'll handle it from here. Other people, they might need a new challenge, or they might need other resources, but you're gonna have to find out what it is. Because when your people know that you're being responsive, it says you are listening, and everybody values being heard, and that draws them in even more to you. So if your people are tired, then you need to understand what's the source of the fatigue. Do they have too much to do? Do you need to argue for some greater resources? Or maybe you need to redesign the way you all are doing things so that all of this is not on one person. But it calls for you as the leader to be far more creative and innovative. And oh, by the way, don't do it in your ivory tower. Put it on the table with the team. Here's the issue. All of you are tired, but we still need to deliver. I'm at my wit's end to figure out how to do it. Can I get some help? Give me some ideas. How can we deliver what we are responsible for delivering as a department in a way that doesn't wipe everybody out? Help me out, because I can't come up with it. I need some help. What's so difficult about saying that as a leader? And you don't know what you're going to unlock with respect to creativity. Nobody is expecting you to know it all anymore as a leader. Things are moving at such a fast pace. Innovation is now happening every 12 months if you're lucky, and it used to be every 10 years. Can you say 8-track, cassette, disc, MP3 to streaming?
Well, I guess sometimes Wall Street is a little slow on these things. I'm not going to name the particular bank, but a few months ago I heard from a former student who said we were told that we're required to come back to the office by a senior person who then did not show up at the office, and it turned out he was on a ski trip.
Ooh.
And the hypocrisy was a little bit distressing. But also, it just reflected a lot of what I've seen, not just on Wall Street, but among leaders in traditional industries of, wait, we just went through 2.5 years of figuring out that even during a global pandemic, we could make remote and hybrid work. Why are so many leaders so slow to embrace it? And can you help me get through to them?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I've been trying to make the same case, Adam. And I keep saying we had record years in these last 2 years. So it's hard to say that everybody needs to be in order to produce. So we know that. That's a fact. And I think that some people have been reticent to just be creative because the answer is not so obvious. They're going to have to think about how to innovate and how to do it differently. And I think the thing that is really holding a lot of people back was the way that they learned, the way that they were taught. And so they just cannot see that you can learn at a faster rate or at the same rate if you don't learn like me. I think that is what has been, imprisoning, if I can use that word, a lot of leaders that are sitting in the seat right now, and they really have to unlock and say, okay, new day, let's try to do it a little bit differently. I hear leaders say all the time, you can't learn unless you're in here. And every time I hear it, I go, oh, but that's the way we learned. But these folks are learning differently. I used the World Book Encyclopedia. Y'all don't even know what that is, right? Okay. It took me hours and hours and hours to look up something, and they can do it in seconds.
It's a more expensive Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They can do it in seconds. So we have to really force ourselves to break out of that mode and think differently. Now, you said, how can I help you get through to leaders? Well, the marketplace is speaking, right? That is what the great resignation is all about. That's what quiet quitting is all about. And I don't call it the great resignation. I call it the great contemplation, because people had 2.5 years to sit at home and say, do I like my job? Do I like my boss? Do I like the career trajectory? Do I like the platform? And for many people, the answer was no. And they had the courage to make a different decision. Now, some people say, oh, they had the courage because they had stimulus money and they had this and they had that. All we need is a good recession, and you'll see. But I don't think it's going to change the behavior of the folks that are sitting in this room right now, right? Because they're looking for more out of their careers than what those of us who are boomers walking out 35 years. We wanted meaning too. We wanted to be able to contribute as well. But I would argue that the money, the position, the power were higher up in the hierarchy of needs than for these folks. And it's not that they don't want money. It's not that they don't want power. It's not that they don't want the ability to influence and contribute to society, but they want it in a certain way. And I think we have to be prepared to offer it that way.
You touch on quiet quitting, and I'm hearing a lot of discussions about this right now among leaders who are saying these employees are lazy, they're not committed, they want work-life balance, which to them means just not working enough. Yeah. And I think about all the evidence on this dating back decades, showing that quiet quitting is not new. It's been happening for a long time. It had different names like mailing it in or phoning it in. Mm-hmm. But what seems to drive it is being stuck in a dead-end job with an abusive boss and being underpaid.
Yeah.
And that's another message that I think a lot of leaders are slow to embrace. What would you say to those leaders?
Yeah, I would say you better get on board. And because there isn't a company or an organization that I know that doesn't want to be considered the employer of choice. And if your people are not willing to stay, it is going to be so expensive for you to keep bringing people in and training them. That's going to impact your bottom line, your profitability. And don't forget this, when people leave your organization, they talk about it. So it's going to impair your franchise at some point. And these folks, unlike us, they actually have a different tool. They have social media, right? So they can also start to impair your brand by their voices and what they say and then saying it online. So you got to be cognizant of these things that are happening. You can't afford to have abusive leaders in your organization anymore, because you will not have people say, back in my day, there were lots of abusive folks on Wall Street, right? You just kind of dealt with it and you just kind of steeled yourself and hope this deal would go over quickly. But these folks leave. They just walk. I'm done. I'm stressed. I need a wellness break. They're out of there. They're out of there. And I'm not making light of that. That's real. We had it too. We just sucked it down, right? And it probably will have repercussions in your 50s and your 60s and your 70s from, dealing with all that stress, but they're not willing to do that now. So you have to recognize that.
You mentioned social media. We got some questions about that. I think I talk with a lot of leaders who are afraid. Mm-hmm. They suddenly realize, wow, I don't have control over what's said about me and my company. What are your thoughts on navigating this new world, both from a leadership perspective, but also what guidance would you give to younger people on that?
Yes. So first of all, if you're going to put, and now I'm speaking to the younger professionals, be careful what you do put online, because it could have repercussions. And you know as well as I do that when people are thinking about hiring you, they look at your social media accounts. I didn't have to worry about that when I was graduating. There was no such thing. But you guys have to look at how you're showing up online. So when I'm mentoring younger people, I say, be careful about when you go to that football game. right? And be careful about the people that you're around. So when you're like, hey, you got all that beer, and you're like, and they're taking a picture and they post it, be careful. Because people can create a narrative around what they see that may not be true. It could have been you in that second. So be careful about your social media presence is what I say to young professionals. What I say to leaders is the fact of the matter is people can say anything they want to say about you anytime, anyway. That doesn't necessarily have to be true. But you should have exemplary behavior and be consistent in that behavior. So if somebody does say something about you that is not true, it truly is an outlier. But when you are choosing to wear that leadership jersey, you are making some decisions about how you're going to show up. It's a responsibility that you've said, I'm going to take on because I want this seat. I want this seat, I want this power, I want this money and everything else that comes with it. Well, guess what? That means you are making a commitment around your behavior. That's real.
It is. Well, speaking of real, okay, so I have to ask you this. One of the things that I think we all can see is one of your superpowers is your ability to deliver a hard truth in a way that makes it sound fun and pleasant.
Well, thank you.
So I wondered if we could run by you a few kind of common dilemmas and get the Carla Harris response to them.
Okay.
One is in a job interview, how do you like to answer the greatest weakness question?
The greatest weakness, I think of something that doesn't necessarily have to do with the job. So for example, if you are interviewing for an investment bank, don't say that your weakness are your analytical skills. If you are interviewing for the New York Times, don't say that your weakness is writing. Right? And, definitely don't say that you're a perfectionist because everybody likes to think of themselves in that way. So things that might be true that I think are real are like public speaking. I can do it. I'm not as good at it as I'd like to do it. Or, I've been trying to learn how to ski for 5 years. I'm terrible. Or I'm terrible at playing golf. Or I'm terrible at having a little bit of patience when people are not kind of pushing all the way in. I've worked in a lot of groups and I'm very inspired when people are working as hard as I am. But when they're not, I have to really kind of get myself together around that. All of that is acceptable.
So you want to hear a weakness that's real but not disqualifying.
That's exactly right. And hopefully that's not a weakness. But because why would you be interviewing at an investment bank if you can't do numbers? Why? That's inauthentic. Don't do that.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, another one. we have some people now rethinking their career paths. But another one that I think I know multiple people in this room have dealt with personally is the abusive boss question. And let's say you either don't want to leave or don't have the luxury of leaving. How do you raise that?
Yes. Well, if you are feeling stuck under one person, that should be your red flag that you haven't built your network around that person enough. So that immediately you should start saying, well, let me make sure that I start building other relationships, because in a perfect world, you want demand pull, to use a marketing term. You want people in other departments to say, hey, I want you to come work for me. But in an imperfect world, you want to be able to go to somebody and say, it's time for a change. Can I join your team? And if you've built your relationships, there's a higher probability that can happen. Sometimes you might have to speak truth to power and say, hey, listen, Adam, you're just tough to work for. I'm giving you my all, but here's what you've done. You've done A, B, C, and D. And I just had to tell you, I don't know if I can do this. And if Adam says, well, let the door hit you, and then I say, okay, duly noted, because I know that I'm good and I'm smart. So maybe it's time for me to find something else to do. And then you go and talk to Adam's boss and say, listen, I just want to let you know what I did, because can't do it anymore.
Can we play that one out for a second?
Sure.
Come in and give me that feedback that I'm tough to work for.
Okay, so I'd say, Adam, listen, it's been really difficult working with you, because every time I bring you something, you spend so much time trying to find the smallest mistake. And I've stayed up all night and I've done a great job. And the work is right. It's perfectly aligned. It's in line with what the client has said. And then I bring it to you and then you want to change it again. And then you tell me I've done something wrong when you didn't give me the right direction in the first place. How am I supposed to do well and make you look good, which is what my job is, if you're doing this all the time?
Well, Carla, I really appreciate that you want to make me look good. I also want you to make me look good. So we're aligned on that. This is not the first time I've gotten feedback that I'm tough to work with, but I've noticed a pattern that it only comes from people who just can't handle my high standards.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe your standards are misaligned, because I've worked for A, I've worked for B, I've worked for C, and all of them say that I've given them exemplary work. So that's the market speaking. You're the outlier.
Would you actually say that in that discussion?
Absolutely, and I have.
I assume, wow, that's amazing. I assume at that point you've decided that if it doesn't go well, you're ready to walk.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And you have to always be thoughtful about your career and who you are and be principled about it. Because if the market is speaking and everybody else is saying that you're great and one person is giving you a hard time, then it's got to be that person, and you got to be willing to go toe to toe, because I would argue that you were being a bit of a bully at that point. And the easiest way to take a bully out is to call a thing and to say you're being a bully and I see you. And when you say I see you, you take away the power. Now, the Adam of 1989 or 1991 would have been hot. I mean, just fire coming out and maybe spewing expletives, right? And I would have just stood there and just looked at him and say, are you done? And then walked. Yeah, I've had those moments, and they were tough. And there were moments when I walked away and thought, ooh, I might as well get my pocketbook. I'm out of here. But 35 years later.
That's incredible. Okay, in closing, is there any advice that you'd love to offer to our audience that we haven't covered?
Especially to the students, I say, do not fear as you go out and you start your careers. As I said, own your power. There's a lot to learn, and there are great experiences that are out there. Be flexible. Don't be so rigid with your goals around what it is you want to do, because sometimes opportunities will come that you did not anticipate, and they may even be lateral, but those lateral moves may actually give you the ability to accelerate vertically later. So don't be afraid of those things, number one. Number two, march to the beat of your own drum. And I know that sounds cliches, but it's so easy when you're in business schools like this to start looking to your left and looking to your right and evaluating yourself against somebody else's report card. Take the time to define your own report card and what's important to you, and maybe a slower pace, maybe a different job, maybe less money. It's going to be fine with you, but don't feel less than about yourself because somebody else is doing something differently. Right? And then I'd say finally, and you're going to hear this from everybody that comes to Wharton Business School to give you guys advice, do try to enjoy yourself. Life is indeed short, and we know not the day or the hour. And the last thing you'd want to do is to have somebody from above come in and say, this is your last day. And then you go, oh, no, wait, I want to do blah, 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 blah. Do it now. Do it now.
So Carla, I can't thank you enough for coming to join us today. This
Adam,
has been
thank you.
So insightful and, of course, entertaining. And I don't think we met before.
No, we hadn't.
But I will tell you, I don't know if this is something you're aware of, but one of the reasons I became a professor was I had one of those abusive bosses who screamed at me for doing something I thought was in the best interest of my company. And I made a decision in that moment, and I said, I will never work for another human being. I don't want someone else. I don't want someone else to have control over my destiny. If I had met you, I would have been thrilled to work for you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.